Without any further ado, I'd like to present Francis Schwartz. Thank you.
Good evening. It's an honor to be here. It's a very special occasion. And I would like to thank, as did Zach, the Young Israel of Tampa, the Florida Holocaust Museum, and of course, the University of South Florida for sponsoring this event. It's very important. And I think that nobody should ever forget the terrible things that transpired in the past. I refer to the Holocaust and also the many other terrible things that have taken place and continue to take place today. The massacres, the hate, the discrimination, and we all have to work to improve this world. And you have to be courageous, you have to speak out, and you can't worry about your personal comfort. That's one of our problems in society. People don't want to speak out, but they want to go along because it's more comfortable. It helps them in their career, in their business. And I'm especially interested in artists speaking out. All artists. Painters, playwrights, composers, writers. They really should address the important social issues of our time. And I was asked to talk about why I do what I do. I frequently write compositions that deal with social problems, with injustice. And I've always asked myself, well, I wonder why do I do this? And why is it so important for me to do this type of musical creativity, or musical activity? And I suppose one reason is that I am the son of a Holocaust survivor. My mother, a very graceful Viennese, was fortunate to be married to my American father in Vienna in 1938 when the Anschluss took place. And thanks to his good offices, he was able to get her out of Vienna and to the United States mere 4 weeks after the Nazis took over Austria. He remained there and he stayed with the entire family, her parents and her 3 brothers and sister, until he was also able to get them all out. So fortunately, that family was saved. They weren't saved from the humiliation that took place in Vienna at that time. I know that my grandfather and my uncle, they were forced to clean the streets of Vienna with brushes on their knees while the citizenry jeered at them. It was a terrible time because people think of, oh, gay Vienna, waltz, all the wonderful things, but there's a very ugly side to it, too. As a child, born in the United States, I heard stories about this. And I read a lot. I saw movies, I saw newsreels, the horrible things that were filmed in different death camps. And at that time, I felt I had to do something. I'm sure I didn't say, you have to do something, but it just came out spontaneously. Now, at the same time, I was studying piano, so 8 or 9 years of age, and I started to write music, very simple things, but I wasn't happy with only the note on the written page in black and white. I thought, no, I want to write with different colored notes, because that would suggest something different. A different way to play the note. If you see a red note, you play it one way, a black note a different way, a blue note, yellow. So I was very much interested in having a very colorful score. And then I said, well, let's expand that. So I stole some of my mother's perfume and I impregnated the score with, I think one was Joy, and another, I remember the dawn, something like that. And so the music that I produced was not only to be heard, but it was to be smelled. And this original experiment turned into something else that you are going to experience tonight in a partial way. Because in 1968, I was 28 years old at the time, I decided to write a piece, the title of which is Auschwitz, the terrible extermination camp in Poland. And I wrote the piece, and it had its premiere at the Puerto Rico Athenaeum in San Juan, Puerto Rico. The audience was seated, conventional style. The doors were closed. And in the back of the theater, I had a team, dear friends, who were burning hair collected from a barber shop and rancid meat. And then we had this aroma disseminated throughout the hall. Now, the piece lasts only 8.5 minutes, but you can imagine you're sitting in a hall, you're hearing some very powerful sounds, some text, dance, and all of a sudden you are attacked by these very terrible aromas. Well, many people were offended, and they got up and tried to leave. But I had my students chain the doors shut. So when they reached those doors to leave, they suddenly could not. It was impossible. And at that moment, there was a feeling of panic. Now, I am not a sadist, but it was my intention to give them some inkling of the horror, of the terror that those people must have felt in the gas chamber when they were with friends, family, children, and the gas started to come in and they couldn't get out, and they were clawing at the doors, and the mothers holding the children up to try to avoid the gas. That was something that took place in the hall. Shortly after, about 2.5 minutes later, we opened the doors. I was cursed. There were people who said bravo. I was threatened with lawsuits. The following day, a very popular TV comedian with a talk show said, I had heard about some crazy composer, Schwartz, who kidnapped an audience. Now, That was probably one of the most important things that I did, because I can tell you, more than 20 years later, I would get students coming to the university, and they would come over to me and would say, "Professor, my parents told me about you." And that was good. And I did this sort of thing at the university. Small performances. And yes, at times Bernie couldn't get away with it today, but different essences so that the people would really feel at least some similarity to what these other people had experienced in the Holocaust. Now, I assure you tonight the doors will not be locked, and we're not going to use the olfactory aspect of this piece. But you will now understand, when you hear it and see it, what the original intention was. A few years afterwards, 7 years afterwards, I wrote another piece, Caligula, the terrible Roman emperor, bloody, cruel, because there were so many terrible things happening all over the world. And it was my idea to mention the names of these sites where things had happened. Santiago in Chile, where the government was overthrown, and then terrible slaughter took place, murder of so many civilians. Katyn in Poland, where the Soviets killed thousands of Polish officers in order to do away with the cream of the Polish military. My Lai, where the United States Army accepted responsibility for the slaughter of civilians in a Vietnamese village, and where Lieutenant William Calley was condemned in a court-martial for the crime. And it goes on and on and on. And there's so many places that I did not use. There's so many more pieces to be written that honor the victims of those places and awakens the conscience of you out there who know that these things take place, or have taken place, may be taking place right now. And it is real news. There's nothing fake about it. The last piece of the first half of the program is called "Of the State of Children." And it starts as if it were a treatise on young people, youngsters. But it was inspired by the many examples of abuse. So many countries, African countries, for example, where children were made into either child soldiers, or they were physically slaughtered, or decapitated, or had their hands chopped off so they could not battle later on when they grew up. Sexual abuse. We hear so much of that, and have read it for decades now, so that it continues today. And I thought this would be a good time to write a piece addressing the problem. So I did. I don't want to give it away, but you will have the opportunity to enter into that world of child abuse, and there is a solution that is proposed. I don't know if everyone will be content with this type of art. It is music, but it's more than music. It has elements of theater. Under certain circumstances, it would have elements of pictorial arts. But it's what I do, what I've done for many, many years, and I hope to continue to do that. So, I hate to use the word enjoy the concert, savor the concert, think about it, be provoked by it, and let us do something to make this a better world. Thank you very much.